Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the Planning and Zoning Commission of Brentwood to order for Wednesday, October 11th, 2023. If you'll please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Since Mr. Moran is traveling abroad, I will attempt to take the role. Please bear with me. Mark Favazza. Here. Sherry Bilderbeck.
Here.
Jeff Moore. Here. Matt Foreman.
Here.
Jeff Hunt.
Here.
Brian Nolan. Here. Lisa Sharing.
Here.
Hart Nelson is also here. We have a quorum. Next order of business is approval of our August the 9th meeting minutes. Thank you to Mr. Vaza for chairing that meeting while I was gallivanting around. The meeting minutes have been distributed. Are there any changes or alterations that need to be made? Seeing none, any objection to approval by acclamation? The minutes are approved. Do we have any citizens wishing to address the commission on items on our agenda? Seeing none. We have no old business. We have two items of new business. The first is P&Z 2312, which is an amendment to ordinance numbers 4810 and 4612. This is a CUP and site development plan for Chick-fil-A. I believe, however, that the applicant has asked that we lay that over for consideration for our next meeting. And so I would entertain a motion to table this application, this piece of new business for our next meeting.
I motion we table that to the next meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been tabled, motion and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. We will carry that one over. Our next item of new business is P&Z 2313, comprehensive sign plan for Gene Dell Printing at 919 Manchester Road. Is the applicant or the representative here? If you could please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and we'll hear a little bit about what you're asking this evening, if you don't mind.
My name is Paul Mullen. I'm with A1 Sign, and I'm working with Mr. Dodal for the Gene Dell sign. We're creating a sign and working with the MoDOT project.
All right. And can you tell us what you're proposing this evening? And then what we'll do, if you haven't seen us before, we'll do that. We'll go to our staff report, and then questions from the commission, and then questions from the public.
Well, there's limitations on what you could do with the signage. We did come in initially and took down his flag poles and his pole sign, which I believe had 2 poles initially. Yeah. And that was a distance away from the road. And now the new box sign, because everything has to be, I believe, around 5 feet tall for the new project. So we're kind of limited on the size and where to put it. One thing I did notice is that the island was certainly different than the new island that is there now. So we're limited on space, and it's kind of an oblong, weird shape. It's smaller down on the east side, and it gets a little larger on the west side. But he's very limited on his parking lot because obviously the new island has pushed some of his parking lot away. So we would like to put the sign still centered in the island the best we can, but it would be within that 10-foot range. If we put it to the east, it won't even fit. If we put it to the far west, visually it'll be bad, and it's gonna get hit by trucks and everything else. And we have to get more electric and everything else run.
So in my understanding, again, so what we have submitted is the plan looking for it to be placed closer to the property line, and then landscaping plan is just to use grass on that. That's what's been presented to this point. And is the orientation as well? It looks like orientation is perpendicular to the road, not parallel. Is that correct? Is that what was being asked for?
As far as the, as far as the sign?
Yes.
Yeah, it would be faced east and west, so you can see it the best you can from that angle. Obviously, it's, due to the island, you want to have the traffic coming up and down the, up and down the road seeing his sign, so.
All right. Go over to staff report, please, Ms. Kelly. And so we'll have staff report, and you're welcome to sit down during that, but when we have questions, appreciate it if you can come back to the podium. Thank you. Yes, please.
printer, so it makes sense there would be lots of pretty handouts. I like shiny color handouts.
I know the stock too, yeah.
Yeah. That's even better stock than this is.
Sorry, I'm not on mic. These are recorded, and the public does view them, so that's why we need to have this for the record.
Most of you have driven by our place and
Yep.
seen the sign where it's at. This sign is 8 foot wide. The new sign is 6 foot wide. So it will be sitting back further than this one is already. And then these are some of our neighbor signs that are, I don't know, they're like grandfathered in, but they're all hanging over the sidewalks now.
Yep, about the park, or the park barriers there, yep.
I mean, that's totally.
Okay.
Oh, and you'll want to talk at the microphone, please, just so everyone can hear you. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
That's
Here's
all
some
right.
of the issues that we have when Erkers, Carl's, and now that's the kind of issues we had in our private property.
All right, thank you. Ms. Kelly, staff report, please.
Whitney Kelly on behalf of the city of Brentwood. As you can see, this site was originally developed in 1986 and showed landscaping along the front. They had a pre-existing non-conforming pole sign that was removed as part of the MoDOT right-of-way improvements in the area. The property line is about halfway through the existing parking lot and they're proposing that the sign be placed 5 feet from that property line and approximately 3 feet to 2.5 to 3 feet from the edge of the sidewalk, as you can see here. Since this would not meet our code requirement, the code does have an option for a comprehensive sign plan where the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend to the Board of Aldermen an alternative to what would normally be allowed. But it has to address all signs on the property, so they're also showing the existing wall sign as well as the non-conforming window signs in one of the windows. This comprehensive sign plan is to provide proposed signs are consistent with the purpose of this chapter. Proposed signs are compatible with theme, visual quality, and overall character of the surrounding area. And proposed signs are in scale harmonious with the development and shall be so located in size as to ensure convenience to the visitor or the occupant of the development while not adding to street clutter or otherwise distracting from the nature of the development and adjacent uses and purposes of the architectural urban design elements. And the proposed comprehensive sign plan is consistent with and furthers the goals of the comprehensive plan. Part of the requirement for a comprehensive plan is a landscape plan for all detached signs, freestanding signs. So they are only proposing the use of grass. However, the code does require street trees. Therefore, staff has recommended that any approval that a landscape plan be provided that be consistent with the zoning code and to soften the impact of the monument sign in that area. It should be noted that the adjacent property, the kitchen conservatory, when it redeveloped, the sign did meet the code requirements to be set 10 feet back. And they did provide street trees and landscaping around it. That was the most recent redevelopment property in the area. The adjacent properties that the applicant referenced are all also non-conforming signs. The comprehensive plan does discuss the use of shared parking and cross-access in the area and landscaping improvements that MoDOT has recently included. I won't go into the specifics, but he has placed a barrier. If you look at the aerial photo, those two parking spaces on the side of the building are actually for parking, where you can see in the aerial photo, and in the photograph on the first page of the staff report showed that there was parking on the side of the building. And show that on this page, figure 5, there was no barrier along that area. So this is inconsistent with the site plan that was approved in 1986. So if the board wishes to allow for the continuation of that, we would need an amended site plan, as that is blocking cross-access, which is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. Available for any questions. So.
All right, I've got a couple, and then obviously I'll open it up to the commission as well. Does the existing wall sign meet, would it require a comprehensive sign plan, or does the existing wall sign meet requirements if it was just standalone?
Yes.
I think it does. And then, and this is actually a question for the applicant, are the window signs that you have, the 100% coverage, are you intending for those to stay? You want to keep those up?
Well, actually, it's 2019.
Okay.
That was from, we were being hurt drastically by internet sales, and all of those signs say "Shop Local" by Brentwood. They're no longer up.
Okay.
We swap them out every.
So those aren't up. Got you.
few months.
Okay.
Just to clarify, if you swap them out every few months, window signage is limited to 20% of the window space. So if they get swapped out or the applicant wishes to continue use of those signs, that is.
It needs to be 20%.
It needs to be at 20% or as approved.
In the comp plan?
Yeah.
Yep, okay,
Yeah, they haven't been up for many years.
okay.
Also, the parking spot she says on the side of the building, that is the driveway. There's a curb cut, you can clearly see it. That's the access to their property. Just because someone painted lines on there, it doesn't make it parking spots. That is their access to their property in the rear of the building.
Okay. All right, make sure. One more question, I think, is, so I did see in staff recommendation and for our landscaping plan, we normally require trees. This island looks fairly small. So I guess my questions there are, would it sustain them? Is it large enough for that? And I don't believe I can see on my overhead here what the island is for Kitchen Conservatory, and just wanting to understand the size difference between those two properties, because I know that that was the most recent, it is right next door.
Right.
But just to understand if that is a reasonable request for this size of island.
So the kitchen conservatory meets the current code, which required at least a 10-foot setback from, to allow for any landscaping. So it was reviewed to provide 10 feet of landscaping along Manchester Road.
And then last question, I've got a lot tonight apparently, because I missed August. Who built that island? Was that MoDOT built? or
MoDOT.
MoDOT built, okay. I will turn it over to members of the commission for questions. Ms. Bilderback.
I have a few initial ones, and then I'll have more as I'm processing this in the conversation. So from what I can tell, there is room for street trees, and that is clearly the requirement. And when we do a comprehensive sign plan, it's kind of allowing for things outside of our sign code, and allowing things for outside of our standard sign code also requires it to be a little special, like for that, but we're talking about the landscape requirements or basic standard requirements that we require for everybody. I also want to make the note that even if, and by the way, this is fantastic printing job. I mean, these are really beautiful posters. Uh, but I want to make the point at the same time that we can't compare to anything that is not, that's grandfathered at the time, because eventually, when properties are redeveloped, that's the whole reason why they have the sign code, right? So comparing, though, to Kitchen Conservatory, I think would be appropriate because it's come through in our current requirements and is new and that sort of thing. So just kind of saying that. I do want to ask, and this is a question for staff, what I had understood, the applicant also had said earlier that there's no cross-access agreement. I'm very familiar with the comprehensive plan encouraging and requiring developments currently to allow for circulation off of the main roadways, especially when we have smaller parcels, trying to have them, come together sort of as we've done like with Walgreens and what, I'm gonna really date myself, what used to be Fridays, which is now a bank that I don't remember the name of, and the rec center. But the idea of being able to drive around and drive through, at the same time, if there isn't a cross-access agreement with the surrounding property owners, what is the city's ability in light of that? I mean, I understand that these blocks were not on the 1985 site plan, so they haven't been approved. So they're there without approval. But I want to get more understanding, and I don't know if perhaps, maybe that's a city attorney question. Like, if they don't have a cross-access agreement with their neighboring property owners, how can we require them to remove the barriers to allow for cross-access easement? I know just by nature of them not being on the site plan, we can require removal. I hope that makes sense. So whoever's on staff first.
Then you can.
Go ahead.
Yep,
It's
please.
fine, I'll-
And the gentleman had said earlier that they don't have that agreement, and he also had showed the pictures of why it's been problematic for them. So go ahead.
The new owner of Carl's took that guardrail down that you see in that picture. We immediately had traffic cutting off the corner to High School Drive. Very dangerous. That's just not right. We paid $34,000 to have that parking lot put down, what, 4 years ago? $3 grand to have it topped and restriped. Or if you're gonna allow Carl's and that building to use that lot, are they gonna reimburse us for that property, for that cost of that parking lot every year?
One thing you were saying is that you were saying that traffic was cutting through from Manchester to High School, but you also said from High School to Manchester. They couldn't cut through for the purpose of avoiding that corner and shortening their trip from High School to Manchester because there's a median there in the way. The traffic's going the opposite direction.
People that are parked in that new spots you guys gave them,
Okay, I'm following what you're saying now.
All right, Ms. Kelly, Mr. O'Keefe, any on the barriers there? Understanding, I think what we're trying to understand is the city's interest in this if there is not a cross-access agreement in place.
I don't consider it a barrier. I parked my van there. She said that was okay because it was a parking lot. So we parked my van and the work van blocking that line for months at a time. But it blocks our driveway as well.
Sir, I don't understand how you can not consider it a barrier. You're putting it there to be a barrier. So let's have them answer that.
Parking spots.
Okay. Right.
What if I just park here?
Right. Right. I mean, the rules apply to everyone, and again, there's an enforcement issue, I understand, if people are actually entering property that shouldn't be entering property. If they're blocking, if they're using your property, parking trucks across it, that's an enforcement issue, and that's something that they should have, that should be enforced. But I do think, again, I want to get to the answer of the city's interest in either eliminating this or not, is really what I understand. Understanding that is not in compliance with the existing site plan, and that if we want to allow it to be kept, we would have to modify the existing site plan. Just want to, I think, is that
Right.
summarizing your question?
Yeah, kind of that, it dovetails. It's simpatico with my question.
If I can take a run at it, I respectfully suggest that the parking stops are not parking apparatus because they are not perpendicular to any parking spaces. So their intended function of providing a stop block for a parked vehicle is inapplicable. They are intended, obviously, to bar passage of vehicles across that path. We are entitled to require that any property owner maintain the property in conformity with the approved site plan. The lack of those items on the approved site plan, and by the way, I don't believe there's been any request to amend the site plan, would make them not in conformity with the approved site plan and subject to removal. In terms of allowing the public or an adjoining property owner to pass over their property, we are not in a position to require them to do that. So we're not saying that anyone ought to have the right to use their property for passage from one public way to another or from someone else's private property across theirs. But putting these stop blocks there is inconsistent with the site plan and not consistent with use of the area for parking.
Great.
That-
Answer. Thank you,
yeah,
Mr. O'Keefe.
That definitely answers my question. And one other thought that I had too is, have we had the fire chief look at this? For
I did show it to the
circulation.
fire chief when this initially came up. The building next door is so small, they'll get around it, basically. So he was kind of either way at
was-
this
yeah.
point, yeah.
So it didn't either way dramatically impact their ability to have access to the property?
Correct.
Okay, because I know a lot of properties, we have different requirements because of that. It's very important. So, okay, and obviously, clearly, it's not on the old site plan, so that's a problem. So I think the two issues, I mean, the landscape requirements are really clear under code, particularly about the trees, and based on the width, I mean, or the depth, I guess you would call that the depth, I mean, it should fit. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Whitney? Sorry.
Just since the commission had questions about the kitchen conservatory, I did pull up the old landscape plan. The sign went right into that middle landscaped island, so it is set back 10 feet with landscaping around it, yeah.
And I literally just drove by. Is that oriented north-south or east-west?
It's north-south. Yeah. Yeah, the sign is north-south, sorry. Yeah.
Please.
Sign's gonna be a ground monument sign, the new sign that we're proposing, are doing. So any kind of trees or bushes, I don't know what size you guys require, I have no idea, because it's not all together me, but I do know anything's gonna be put in there is gonna visually impact the sign's visual. So, whatever it would be, I would hope that it's very small, like grass and maybe flowers or something to that effect, but the bigger it is, it ends up impacting the visual of the sign.
I have a question on that topic.
Sir, Mr. Nolan.
Follow-up, staff, could you discuss what exactly is required? You mentioned in the report street trees. I guess my biggest concern with the sign, if we're going to put it closer than 10 feet to the roadway, is blocking traffic. So if we're going to have some other landscaping requirement, what exactly would be required, or could we change that to only require ground coverage instead of street trees?
It is in the staff report under, let's see, on page,
Top of
6
page
of 8.
6. Yeah.
So the landscaping requirement requires that you have one street tree for every 35 feet on center. So if you are going to allow the sign closer to the road, you can easily put the trees behind it. And that would, for this property, that'd be about 2 to 3 trees.
How big's the island? How long?
That I don't have information on. They did not provide that.
I mean, every 35, yeah. I mean, every 35 feet.
I don't have a lot of copies like Mr. Doodle,
No.
so you guys have to pass them around.
So, yeah.
I hate to do this because it's awkward, but if you could show those, you can put them in front of folks, but we need to use that microphone so we can have for the record what we're discussing here.
The east side,
Yep.
as you can see, it's very tiny. So this is pictured visually, it's down here. The west side, it gets larger as it goes back, but it does it in an angle.
Yeah.
And as you can see at the very end, it's large at the very end. The only way I could put that sign to fit in within the 10 feet would be that back corner back there, which trucks and everything would hit it. So I don't know where trees and stuff like that would go.
And I think they're separate, actually, and just, Mr. Nolan, just a clarification question to make sure I understood your question correctly. You're talking about, are the trees going to block traffic or traffic sightlines? Is that what you're talking about? Or both? Traffic sightlines, okay. And I think that, Ms. Bilderback, your point was with the trees that we're talking about, the intent of them is the fact that they are narrow base, they get bigger at the top. They're specifically designed for frontage, so it's not to block traffic sightlines.
Yes.
Yeah, and they're that style of tree that is required, so it doesn't block the sightline. You know, one point I would make is, I think the request is a landscape plan, because I think that what I'm hearing from the commission is that we're having challenges seeing with what the code requires, which is trees, and hearing Ms. Kelly say, probably 2 to 3 with the size of this space, how exactly would that come together? Well, that's exactly what a landscape plan is designed to provide for us, and so I think that is